This is 20 Minutes of Impact from the United States Energy Association Power Sector Podcast. I'm Herman K. Trabich. I've covered the power sector since 2006, and I currently report for Utility Dive. My guest today is Joe Perello, founder and CEO, creator performance platform Props. Joe's going to describe his groundbreaking idea to better delivery of the utilities' messaging and notifications to their customers during extreme weather and other power sector threats by recruiting local media creators. Joe's career in marketing and messaging goes back to 1989 and has included executive positions with the New York Yankees, David Bowie's Ultrastar Entertainment, and he was the first chief marketing officer of the city of New York. He co-founded digital marketing group Catch New York in 2009, and he represented Nike, HP, Michelle Obama, and many others. He founded Props in 2017 as a creator marketing platform. So, Joe, first of all, what do you mean by local media creators? And how did you link the public perception that local creators may be more reliable communicators than utilities
Mm.
to the communicator's potential value in getting crucial messaging out during extreme weather events and other kinds of power sector emergencies? This is an interesting idea.
Well, thank you for having me, Herman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience and to you. Um, the idea of creator marketing is an offshoot of influencer marketing.
Mm,
Influencer marketing is really propagated by social media and the ability for people to have direct communications with their audiences. That industry has been plagued what I call the follower fallacy. And that industry started off very successfully by leveraging an influencer's followers. And what brands who adopted influencers, and they still do, were asking of influencers is to do two things: create compelling content and distribute it by means of their followers.
mm,
Where that falls down is when you understand that followers is an unreliable measurement of distribution for
yes,
some basic reasons. One is
absolutely.
you don't know who they are.
Right.
Number two is they're not mostly real people. 30% of followers are sort of false or fraud. And the
Mm,
most important point is major platforms like Meta and now TikTok essentially govern how many of your followers see your organic posts. And that has been measured between 5 and 10%. So, in effect, an influencer is reaching between 5 or 10% of an audience that you don't know if it's right. And so, so what we love about the influencer industry is the humanity and the relatability, um, and the effectiveness of creators, and that they are our peers, essentially
mm,
our peers. What we combined at Props to create a performance based creator marketing system is to merge that idea with the reliability, the accountability, and the scale of paid media. And when you combine the humanity of creators with the scale and efficiency of paid media, you can turn creator marketing into what we call a performance channel. And as you know, Herman, in the marketing business, performance marketing is not a new idea. It is simply being measured by the near term effectiveness of your campaigns rather
mm.
than the years, measuring brand awareness over the course of a year, which we still do. But we're in the performance marketing business, and that means assigning tangible business results to campaigns. So that's how we're different than influencers. You asked me about creators, right? And in my mind, creators are journalism quality, right? We recruit them at Props first and foremost for their subject matter expertise. So they may be a data scientist, or they may be a fire person, right? Or they may be a climatologist, right? We're recruiting them for that expertise first and foremost, not their followers. We don't care about their followers because we're going to use paid media to distribute their content to exactly the right people. The second thing we're looking for is obviously, can they make compelling content, right? Are they a good storyteller? And then the third is, are they reasonable people to work with? Which is very important, as you can imagine.
And you mentioned, if I may, you mentioned response, immediate response, and there could be nothing more clear than a utility communication during an extreme weather event or some sort of power sector emergency.
Yeah.
Then is that creating a response? It was that I wanted to ask you. You evaluated utilities communications. I assume that you must have noticed that, and you decided to bring their messaging to these local creators, these local media channels. Was that the first discovery that you realized that you had a credible person and you could measure the immediate response during a safety issue or an outage issue?
Our
Communicating.
our first engagement was more in the preparing the public for a potential crisis. So not in the crisis moment, I would say, but more importantly, our first engagement with a major utility was around the idea of trust. That is really the fundamental value proposition of communicating a utility's message through a third-party creator. And
you're saying that when you say trust, is that the public will trust the communicator more perhaps than it trusts the utility? Is that what you're trying to get at there?
100%.
Interesting.
100%. Look, utilities are doing amazing work around the country. They are doing amazing work, like truly innovative. They are on the front lines of defense against weather and catastrophe, right? And harm. And because when things go wrong with a utility, everyone knows about it and it is widely reported on. Utilities get a bad rap. I mean, look, some of them have failed in the past a long time ago. And this isn't to relitigate that. But what's mattered to utilities is that they have a difficult time, because they're regulated bodies, of communicating to their audiences with a human and authentic voice. And I'm speculating on the reasons why they have a hard time. I think some of it is they're not in the customer acquisition business. Okay, so that doesn't need to be a core discipline for them to be effective. And number two, the risk that they have is incredibly high if they miscommunicate. Yeah. And therefore, their first lever is, don't get us sued. And that is not a good foundation for clear communications. And I'm not saying that creators just say what they want. I'm not saying that at all. I guess what I'm getting at is I don't think utilities should be so hard on themselves for them having a hard time communicating their messages to the general public because they've been hamstrung sometimes by their own institutions and their own bureaucracy, and sometimes because they're regulated, and also because they don't have the core consumer marketing infrastructure necessary to survive and thrive. So
You know,
when I
it's
say trust, what I mean is that people are so used to hearing very mundane and legal communications from utilities that most people are tuning them out.
interesting. You know, I did this past September 11th, I did an interview, a podcast with Consolidated Edison there in the city where you are in New York City. And what they did after the planes hit the towers was absolutely miraculous. They got the Lower Manhattan up and working in 6 days.
Yeah.
Um, but yet, when something like Superstorm Sandy comes along, they're trying to communicate about it, and they're addressing something that's really pretty unpredictable for almost everybody,
Yes.
and they get blamed more for that than they get credit for what they do in times of emergencies.
No, without a doubt. I mean, we've gotten to know this culture, and they are the unsung heroes, right, of our American infrastructure. They really, really are unsung. And, we could speculate on why. I think there's a communication problem and it's inherent in the system. They're also regulated bodies, and that causes its own complications. I mean, you don't market bleach or soap reporting to a board
Exactly.
that of lawyers. That's not how P&G builds brands. And so I think we should acknowledge that utilities, they have a hand tied behind their back when communicating.
Well, what works? I mean, you say that these local creators have the trust. What works for them that
Yeah,
allows them to convey the utility message, and what doesn't work, by the way? I think that's an important thing to
yeah.
think about too.
So what works is you hinted at it, right? First is all utilities are regional. And so all utilities care deeply about their neighborhoods, and they care about the safety of their neighborhoods and the thriving of each neighborhood because that's where they live and that's where they work. So recruiting local creators is paramount to preserving authenticity. That's number one. Number two is we recruit creators who have an expertise in something that the utility cares about, but may have a difficult time in communicating. Perfect example, right? Utility on the West Coast has spent billions of dollars doing something very simple. They're burying power lines.
Yeah.
This is a simple idea that is incredibly valuable, very difficult to do, and the fact that their constituency understands that they're doing this is a trust building communication device. There's nothing more important than that because you're essentially getting to the root of the problem by making the investment to do something very simple. The creators who we recruit to talk about this might be firefighters who explain how this starts, okay, from a different point of view. There may be a wildfire point of view. There just may be, this is physics. And we're explaining how we're creating a shortcut to physics. So that firefighter, who, by the way, doesn't work for the utility,
Ah,
is not
yeah.
an employee of the utility, They're not from the PR group of the utility. Of course, their messages are vetted because they need to be accurate. But this is someone from the community who's explaining, like my neighbor explaining to me, what this utility is doing to keep us all safe. Urban, that has much more value than the head of corporate communications issuing a press release about the work they're doing to bury power lines.
Wow.
So
I
the other aspect of this, I'll just add one more thing, is the creators are people, and their message has personal consequence associated with it.
mm,
Look, if a utility screws up, they're going to recover. And yeah, it's going to stink for a little while, but they're going to recover. If a creator continues to endorse a crappy product, they're going to fail as a creator. They're going to not make a living any longer. And so I think people understand that this person has some personal consequences around what they're saying. And
uh,
so their word means more. When I
integrity.
say, yeah, I say, look, here's what's happening. It means more than the billions that a utility or the hundreds of millions a utility may put out there in the marketplace. One or five creators' words go so much longer.
It's easier to see the creator's integrity than it is to see the utility because the utility has vested interest. The creator presumably is just saying it because he or she feels that it's true. Is that
Well,
right?
I think yes, I think what you're saying is the communications department has an obligation to say nice things.
Right.
And the
Yeah.
creator is not under an obligation to say nice things, but they agree. Look, I think you mentioned the word integrity. I think they both have integrity. I think utilities have integrity. Their perceived integrity may be lacking.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
I
Absolutely.
really do think, I mean, utilities have an enormous amount of integrity on the whole, but it's not always perceived that way. And look, they're in a hard position, and that's why I believe they're finding success adopting creators, peers, right, our friends, as the main mode of communication to disseminate important information. Now, you asked about crisis, and I think the role in creator marketing leans more towards preparation and education and information, and can be used in crisis if you have a well-oiled, highly organized, fast acting creator media system.
Perfect segue, Joe. I want you to
Yeah.
tell us a couple of stories. It sounds like you've had some real experience in this area. Uh, Stories that show how these creator-led communications have improved utilities' reach, engaged more of the public, got a better response during preparations for extreme weather.
Yeah.
Give us some examples. This is the last, we're running out of time, but I really want to hear a couple stories before we close this out.
Yeah, sure. There's two basic ones that I can share with. One I sort of touched on,
Great.
which is wildfire preparation. Like what are utilities doing to minimize and hopefully eliminate wildfire? These are experts in data science, climate change, and firefighting, and they're all real people with real expertise explaining what these utilities are doing to keep us safe. The second one is different. It is about all the things the utilities are doing to keep things affordable. And like many utilities, there are programs they have for people who may need help with their power bill. And these are actually family creators, finance creators that are talking about how they're using these tools in their family to balance budgets, gain assistance, and how this is available to the public or their constituency. Those are two great examples. The measurement, you asked me about the measurement. So the measurement is essentially 17 times better than the result you could get from ads. 17x. When you measure it,
Joe,
yeah,
can I interrupt just for a second? So that's really, I didn't ask you the channels that you use. So
oh,
you're better than ads. Are you talking still about social media?
yes,
But not ads, not TV ads. So they're going through social media channels and they're getting 17 times better what?
results.
Um, results.
It,
How do you measure results?
engagement rate,
Uh,
brand lift. Brand lift is essentially did did you remember my story, and did it have a positive effect on you? That's it.
mm,
Now, when we run creator marketing through paid social, our results are 17 times better than what a utility could run in paid social. But it doesn't stop at social, where we run these on connected TV also in people's living room. Okay, we're not on broadcast TV, which we could be,
mm.
but connected TV seems more aligned with our very targeted media approach. But essentially, yes, it's 17 times better. And Herman, that reflects the types of results that we see when we work for brands, right? In brands, we're typically 8 to 12 times better than their ads. In the utility sector, we're 17 times better than their ads.
Wow. Wow, that's really interesting. So the idea is that if I tell my story that I happen to get on in the podcast, it's not my story, it's Consolidated Edison's story of what they did on 9/11. It can offset 17 times more than if Con Ed runs an ad that
Yes,
says we're working for you or something like that.
yes, 100%.
Interesting. Okay, I think that'll do it. I think you've communicated this concept, a really groundbreaking idea. You've done a real job of a great job of explaining it, Joe. Got to thank you. My guest has been Joe Perello, founder and CEO of creator performance platform Props, for describing his work to better deliver utilities messaging and notifications to their customers during extreme weather and other power sector threats by recruiting credible local media creators. As always, I also want to thank our listeners for taking the time to check out the USEA Power Sector Podcast. Don't forget, subscribe, like, and share with everybody you know our quest for energy transition solutions.